Trying to switch up the dance moves because we're here, ladies and gentlemen, with episode number 18. Here we go. How are you doing today, Brad?
Doing well. Hey, got a little damp today thrown in the field test. It was pouring down the rain, but nonetheless, had a good time. Tried some discs that I maybe arrogantly thought were going to be very easy to throw and turned out to be a little problematic for me, but I think I learned some good lessons. So happy to share with the world today and our guest, Travis. So looking forward to it.
Absolutely. I mean, and we don't always get to test in the most ideal conditions, and we don't always play in the most ideal conditions. So I feel like this will be a fun review of, hey, if I could see what these discs were doing in those conditions that you just threw in, can't imagine what they'd be like if you played on a pretty day. So hopefully it works out for Travis and his bag, but why don't we just dive on in and see what he thinks?
All right, let's get Travis in.
Ladies and gentlemen, we have with us another special guest for another special week of In the Bag. Travis, how are you doing today, sir?
Wonderful today, Robbie. Thanks for having me.
Come on. Where are you joining us from?
I'm in Canada, another Canadian guest up in New Brunswick. So, about 17, 18 hours north of you, a little bit northeast.
Okay.
Fantastic.
Ideal disc golf climate, I think, in the wintertime.
Well, yes, that's definitely when I started playing. I guess we'll get into a little bit of that in a bit.
Absolutely.
Yeah. So we'll just dive right into it right now. Travis, how long have you been playing?
Yeah. So, like a few disc golfers, I'm a rec ultimate player. In my mid 30s, I started out with that when I just wanted to get a bit more exercise, and then probably January of 2021, I just saw some guys throwing discs into some snowbanks out where I walk my dog, and it turns out they had set up this object course, and I was like, I gotta go talk to these guys, see what is this stuff they're doing. And they brought me in, taught me all about it, and history's history. I've been playing for almost 2 years now since then.
That is awesome. I feel like object courses, for those of you who, when he said object course, you're like, I have no idea what that is. Before disc golf courses started popping up everywhere, we had an object course that we would play on our college campus where hey, there's a light pole here. That's hole one. Throw from this fountain to that light pole. Super, super fun. Object courses need to come back.
Oh, yeah, I love it. It makes you maybe a bit overconfident with your putting when you're throwing at this very narrow pole, and then, it's not always like that.
That's fair. My brother, my middle brother, has a course up near where he went to school where they just had a bunch of plywood poles and stuff like that. And I always thought that putting on those got a little tricky because I was like, if you miss, it's gone. But hey, that's okay. I'm all about differences, right? If you get what you can, get a course in, start playing some disc golf. Don't care what the objects are like. We want to get to know you as a player as well and know your skill set, Travis. So let us know, how far do you throw golf distance, backhand and forehand?
Yeah, backhand. If I'm trying to hit a target, I feel pretty okay around the 250 range. If it's wide open, 3 is a very good day. I go to a field that's a soccer field, and I'm always thinking if I just stand at this one soccer goal, I know it's 330 to the other one. That's my goal. Eventually hit that soccer goal, 330. But I'm not there yet, Robbie.
Hi. It's a good goal for multiple reasons. I'm sure it will be super satisfying that one day that you just rip one and all of a sudden it's just slides right in and you're like, oh,
yeah,
here we go, baby. Start running around, slide on the grass. We did it. Okay, so that's backhand. Forehand. Talk to me about forehand.
Forehand, it's not the same as ultimate throwing with these discs. It's 100 if I'm aiming. And any more than that, and it's turning over. It's definitely not my strong suit.
That's okay. We got to work somewhere. Yeah. So let's head to putting then. If we're not necessarily on the distance range, sometimes putting, we can lean on that. We set you up at a putting green, 15 feet, 25 feet, 40 feet. How many of 10 putts at each? How many are you making?
15 feet, probably 7 or 8. There's a chance I'm going to miss a couple, of course. Being realistic, not internet numbers, probably 7 or 8. 25, that's where things start to get dicey for me. I'm not someone who usually practices very much at Circle 1 Edge. So probably like 2 to 4, being honest. The other number was 40, I think.
Yeah.
If I'm playing a game and I'm 40 away and I'm playing like singles, I'm laying up. If it's doubles and my buddy's still saying go for it, I'm like doing a baby throw to try to get it there. So
Okay.
realistically, maybe 1 or 2.
Okay.
Yeah.
That's fair. And I think you're the first person I've heard us have on the podcast that has like been completely honest about the fact that like at 40, you're like, yeah, I don't even go for it.
Yeah. No.
Does that sound right, Brad?
It's like,
Yeah, I think so. You're the first Travis and the first person to admit to laying up. So a lot of firsts here.
right on.
And I'm here for the layup strategy. Here's what I will say, listeners of the podcast. If that's where you're at, I would much rather you lay up from that range than be like, oh, I'm a jump putt pro at this point, and then just like wildly flail the disc and then 3-putt anyways. Just lay up. It's okay. It takes time. So that's fantastic. So with all of that being said, Travis, what would you say is the strength of your game?
100 to 150 approach shots. I feel pretty good at getting it inside that 15 feet where I'm feeling good about my putt. That's where I would say is like my sweet spot in my game.
Okay. That's awesome. So if you're playing like, if you're not playing a super long course, like 300 something foot, 400 foot holes, usually par feels pretty obtainable there because you just throw your drive out there and then park it for the upshot.
Exactly. Par's really comfortable. Birdies are hard.
That's true.
That's
That's maybe the truest thing I've ever heard.
yeah. As the league round that I played this past Sunday, I couldn't buy a birdie to save my life. So
Yeah.
I feel that deep in my soul. Well, Travis, that is awesome. We have your bag, and we want to dive through it. The first thing, we're going to start with your putters and work our way up because we're actually going to talk about distance drivers today.
Sweet.
So I want to look at giving you a distance driver option. And when we get to fairways, I have some questions for you regarding why you have no distance drivers in your bag. And I'm very excited to hear. So let's start with that sweet spot, that those putters, you're putting with pures. Mm-hmm. Love that. You don't have a throwing pure in your bag. Have you ever had a throwing pure in your bag?
I do, and I still have it on the shelf. And you may find this funny. So I've got a Kristen Tatar Opto X1.
Okay.
But it's the like exact same color as my fuse, and I'm just like, can't have that. It's too samey in my bag. So I took it out of my bag. If I really need to throw like a straight shot, I've got another disc for that, for that kind of putting shot.
Okay. So what disc are you throwing there?
A Proxy. Proxy's
Awesome.
my pretty straight tunnel, off the tee or approach, but not too far disc.
Yeah. So looking through your bag, it looks like it's primarily Latitude 64 and MVP / Axiom. Does
You
that
got
feel
it.
right?
Yep, totally.
So why those two brands?
I kind of started out with a few different Latitude discs, watched a bunch of Jonathan videos, then the James shot happened. I'm like, okay, let me try these guys out, and it just kind of evolved over time. Yeah.
So okay, I completely understand. It's crazy to think that we're obviously a little past because Worlds is later this year, but I like, in my heart of hearts, I have my fingers crossed that something crazy happens. This will drop on Friday, and Saturday we'll have the final day of Worlds. I would be down for like something
Yeah.
electric like that again.
Yeah,
Ah.
absolutely. And
Bring
it
it
looks
on.
like you have your Envy as well. How does your Envy fly for you? I'm just very curious.
For me, it's honestly not that different from my Proxy because it's like getting kind of beat in at this point, but I can rely on it more on a hyzer to not flip up when I don't want it to. that's the kind of the shot that I use it for.
Okay. Interesting. And that varies from your entropy. How so?
Yeah.
Yeah, that's a good question. My entropy's newer, so those are probably kind of close, I guess. Well, the entropy is like, it'll even come out of an Anheuser. It's, for me, that it's got that much fade.
Yeah,
and I use the entropy for like a very specific forehand shot at the course that we play, so I kind of like it for that.
Yeah, so it's new enough that like you saw a hole or something on a course, a problem that you couldn't solve with your current bag, put that in. So would you say that you're not that comfortable yet experimenting with the entropy around the rest of courses?
No, I'll definitely throw some approach shots for it, but it's probably the sort of thing that, like, yeah, if I'm honest, the Envy could probably get me there too. I would just throw it on a bit of a different line.
Okay. Very interesting. So talk me through differences between the proxy and the spin.
The spin, once upon a time, was a deputy.
Okay.
But it got like just so beat up. So then I was like, okay, let me try to look for something else. I like the gyro stuff, and Jesse at Trash Panda did like a video on the R2 stuff, and I was like, okay, let me give these a try, and pretty happy with it, honestly. It's got like no fade at all. I mostly use it for like patent pending or like specific tee shots where I just really want it to go right.
Okay. Especially not having the forehand, you feel like having that spin gives the comfortability there?
Yes, you got it.
So I think this is a good transition for us to head up to. I think you've got a good setup here. I want to go ahead and compliment you on your putters. I think that the Envy and the Proxy have a very similar hand feel. So yes, they're not ideal in terms of like subconscious confidence that we talk about on the show, but I think they're so close that I almost consider them like the exception to the rule. If you love an Envy, the only alternative I would suggest is if like you really love the Envy over the Proxy, I would try premium plastic versions. I would either try a premium plastic Proxy or an Electron soft Envy. I think could very quickly beat in and likely replace either your Proxy or your spin.
Good
just
idea.
as an option to look at. So, but only Electron soft. I think the Electron itself still has a bit of that straight flight. The soft beats in really fast. So would definitely look at it there. When you're throwing the spin on sort of that, you're right-handed, Travis?
Yeah, that's right.
Okay, so when you're throwing that spin, trying to get it on that going right line, what's the distance threshold that you're going to be throwing the spin versus stepping up to the uplink for that line?
Probably 200 or less. I'm throwing the spin. Uplink is if I have the same kind of line, but I need to go further than 200. Up to asterisks, I don't know. Yeah, that's kind of what I'm doing with the uplink. Or I'll maybe try to hyzer flip the uplink if I need it to go like a little bit straight and then turn. And I know the spin, it just won't get that far.
Okay. Yeah. Brad, how does that look in like, I'm trying to remember what you have in that understable putter slot.
Well, I don't really have anything. That's the problem. I've been feeling the spin at the warehouse, to be honest with you, the R2 one specifically, because I heard it was very similar flight to the uplink. I was telling Jason today, actually, we had a talk at the warehouse, and that's why I asked about your entropy as well versus your Envy, because I bag an Envy. If you recall at the very beginning of this podcast, I really had like this stacked distance driver category, right? Like everybody does. And now I'm like working from the bottom up again. I have like this large selection in my like approach / mid-range category. And I really feel like I'm missing something very understable like that. So I want to try the spin for sure, but I want to get a couple other options. So maybe that's a good guess to have on Robbie, understable putters.
Yeah, absolutely. I will start looking. If you're that person listening, message me. Let me know. Hey, I don't throw understable putters, and I'd like to. So we will all learn together. So I love the uplink for that. Obviously, we're big fans of the uplink here in the bag. And when we go from the uplink over to the fuse, what what's the situational difference there?
Yeah, my fuse for me is more of a straight shooter. It's in that like X-line plastic, so it's like I personally feel like it's a little more straight. It'll still like turn over if I give it a good amount of power, but I can also give it some touch and just have it like on a line go straight for me.
Is it one of the Johnny Gold lines?
You got it, yeah.
Okay, awesome. With like the weird like initial
That's
combo
exactly
thing
it.
in the middle. Okay,
Yeah.
awesome. Yeah, I love that run of fuses personally, but I agree with you. I don't think there's this weird world of if you love a mold and you're listening, try Trilogy Plastic, because there are few companies that make their molds in as many plastic varieties as Trilogy does. It is crazy to me how flexible you can take one mold just based on plastic type alone. So I completely agree with you, Travis. The Fuse Goldline X is not really a fuse. In a similar world that I would say your Kristen Pure is probably not like the most pure of pures.
Exactly.
Still a great disc, but not necessarily what we're looking for. Okay, so that makes it interesting to me because I think the fission reactor is a more straight reactor compared to the usual fade that you would see in like a neutron or a cosmic neutron reactor. So then what's the difference between your fuse and your reactor?
Yeah, for me personally, the fission reactor still has like a tiny bit of fade at the end. You're right, like it'll go straight for a pretty long time. And it might just be a mental thing that I feel like it's going to have more fade at the end. So I feel more confident throwing that when I need to do that.
Yeah, I think it does have fade. That's not me saying that it doesn't have any fade whatsoever. Sure. But if you ever compare a fission reactor to a like neutron or cosmic neutron, I have like, that's why I came off of EMAG Truths for a while, because EMAG Truths, I felt like when you hit them really hard, they just stayed straight. Like they never faded. And the reactor, I'm with you. Like, unless I'm throwing into a headwind, 9.9 times out of 10, I'm still going to see that reactor finish. So I think that's a great alternative. And I actually think your mid ranges are pretty balanced in that. Obviously, there's an outlier on the far left. You got a pyro in there.
Yeah.
So what's the pyro doing?
It's pretty awesome for me in that if I throw it kind of really hard, when it hits the ground, it does this like big skip to the left, which is just interesting to have. I can also, that's one that I'll occasionally forehand. It feels comfortable for that. I know I'm not getting much distance off of it, but it's one that I can like kind of accurately put places. Or if I throw it on like a big sweeping hyzer, I can feel kind of confident that I'll know about where it'll land.
Yeah. Okay, so Brad, ground play, do you have a mid-range that you throw for ground play? Or do you usually jump up to like a fairway for that?
Big old Bobcat. That's what I'm loving, the Bobcat for that. And I picked it for that reason. Once I started throwing it, it gives me a flare skip at the very end, like 9 times out of 10.
That's so interesting to me, gentlemen, because I'm thinking of the disc I have in that slot in my bag is a Justice, and I'm trying to think like, have I just shied away from ground play for so long that I'm not thinking about it? We're playing a disc dice round at League tonight, so perhaps I'm going to join you guys in the fun of like, I'm just going to try to skip that Justice everywhere. So
I don't know.
I love that.
I don't know. Is that like a bad thing? I mean, I'm being serious. I don't know. I feel like I play that shot. Maybe it's because I don't have the control on my disc and like flex lines and things, but I don't know. I feel like I play, especially with my Vulture, like I'll bring out my Z Vulture every time if I know, like I think it's hole number 3 at New London or hole number 2. I'm not sure. But you have to skip around the corner at the very last and the basket's all the way to the left. But I have to hit this like straight line because I have trees everywhere. And I'll play the ground skip every time on that. So I don't know.
Yeah. We can talk about it. I think that's one of the beauties of this podcast is we're trying to talk about those things. As two people throwing that ground skip shot, how often would you say, like percentage-wise, it goes according to plan? And on the percents that it doesn't, how bad does it go?
So for me, Travis, it's about 50-50. And even the 50% that's not where I want it to be, I still am in a better spot than if I try to do something creative, flex it around, spike hyzer, whatever. So that's me, Travis. I don't know about you.
Yeah, no, that sounds pretty right. It is the kind of thing that when I try to do that shot, it's because I don't feel comfortable getting it close to the basket with a different line. And yeah, 50-50 sounds right. Like, I'm pretty confident that I can make it skip, but I mean, it depends on the weather. Like up here, if the ground is icy, I can do it. But if I'm playing in the spring and it's all muddy, then like, why is this even in my arsenal? You know, like, so you win some, you lose some.
Yeah, that makes sense. I see a lot of, I think right now, rather than that ground skip, I think I've been leaning on sort of the Anheuser approach. Like, instead of going the ground skip, it's almost like trying to go high with it on this Anheuser and let it maybe flex in or something like that. But that usually 9 times out of 10, that's coming on a forehand angle for me, which neither of you are forehand dominant players, we'll say. We'll leave it at that, right?
Well put.
So, yeah, we're not here to demoralize people, Travis. That's not our heart or our goal at all. So, no,
I thought
think
that
was. Go ahead.
It was interesting though, because I never really thought of it being like it is dangerous. I mean, let's be honest here, especially if you're like, oh, I need to hit this. So I just did this weekend. This is why it's fresh in my mind. I threw a zone off the tee forehand, and it was kind of downhill, and I'm like, oh, that's okay. And I almost never get a skip off of my zone. And I hit, and it just went crazy. So like, that was the 1%, Robbie, where it was really bad. So I guess I never really thought about maybe trying to approach that shot a little differently on like an Annie forehand, or try to get creative versus the skip. So just interesting. I thought I'd ask, because surely I'm not the only one that's like, oh, is a skip a bad thing?
Yeah, no. And I think that like something I've been messing around with on the Annie forehands even is like, when is an Annie forehand with an understable disc the better option versus coming in with something super stable and trying to get it to flex a little bit? Because I think those are two very different shots, because if you're going with the understable, then you always bring the cut roll into play, which isn't great. So yeah, I think playing around with your discs is something that I'm trying to embrace more and more in my own game, is just what's the potential of every disc in my bag. And the skip shot is definitely something you need to have. And I also think people don't think about skip shots in tighter tunnels and whatnot. But like, we have a course in town that's only like 180 feet, but people take bogeys on it all the time because the fairway is like 6 feet wide at its most. And so I love the skip shot on that hole only because instead of having to hit the fairway the whole way down, I aim for the ground like 40 feet off the tee and just throw a fairway driver at it, and it hits and it flares forward and up. Basket moves off to the left. So I think that practicing that shot, especially for the hole you're kind of talking about, Brad, of like trees all around you, aiming for a specific point in the ground isn't necessarily, that's like almost easier to do sometimes because there are markers there than like, I can see this arbitrary line in the air. So yeah, all that to say, gentlemen, it's good conversation. So I appreciate y'all opening my eyes to a shot that I've not been utilizing lately. So Travis, one of the reasons that I wanted to bring you on is I'm so fascinated with the few molds you have in your bag, or a few discs. You have a lot of molds, but the few discs you have in your bag. You keep a very low count. Do you find that, like, why do you try to keep so few discs in your bag?
To me, it kind of seems to make sense based on how I feel my distance game is at. Like, I feel like based on how far I can throw, having like 20 or 30 discs doesn't make any sense. Listening to you guys talk about minimalization and to some extent, and it's not even like a bag limit, to be honest. I've got like Atlas Pioneer, and it's like I can fit like 10 more discs in there if I really wanted to. But I I don't know. I've kind of been doing it this way for a while, and I haven't really found that other disc that I want to put in yet. So
That's fair. I respect that. I respect the options of why overcomplicate within those norms. I've thought about the same process of if next time I go to play golf, I don't even think I'm taking like hybrids or a driver or anything. I think I'm just going to take like a 7-iron and down and be like, let's do it, y'all. Let's see if the same principles apply to real golf. So let's talk about fairway drivers, and then I want to jump into our suggested disc for the day, because I think this will be good conversation. I think we can look at two options on both sides of your fairway drivers and pretty much assume what those are for. You got a fireball and a virus. I'm assuming fireball is just a longer pyro.
yes, that's absolutely right. Long pyro. There's a few holes where I know if I just huck it in this direction, a little bit of Annie, it can reliably get around that tree. You know the tree.
Yeah.
We all have that tree.
Yeah, exactly.
Okay. Do you try to skip it as well?
No, that's not really something that I try to do with it, but I probably could. It's just not something that I've thought about for it.
Oh, totally fair. Okay, and then the virus, longer uplink or different shots?
Honestly, virus is like kind of my, I need to throw this as far as I can, and it's kind of wide open. It'll like do kind of a sweeping S-curve and just get as far as I can hypothetically go with anything in this bag.
Okay.
Yeah.
Max distance, open field.
Yeah, you got it.
Okay. Awesome. And then you've got a river and a crave, but the river you said is more beat in than your crave.
Yes. The river is more beat in. It's a little bit more understable. Also, because the river is so glidey, I kind of don't trust it as much in the wind. If it's a little bit more windy out, I'll throw the crave. If I have a tailwind or no wind, I'll throw the river. It's kind of my thought process around those two.
Yeah. So I think the river advertises that it has 7 glide. Would you say that's accurate?
Mine is really domey. It feels very glidey. And like if there's a gust, it's just like going everywhere. So, yeah.
Okay.
7.
Yeah, 7 at minimum. I love it. Now, when you're throwing your virus, because this will kind of segue us into the disc suggestion we have for you, because you have no distance drivers in the bag. Mm-hmm. And does that kind of lean into what you were saying before of like, I keep fewer discs because I feel like this is how far I'm throwing, so you're just not entertaining the idea of distance drivers right now?
I would definitely entertain the idea of distance drivers. I just have never, I don't know. I guess mentally, I'm always thinking like, maybe I should try to get to that figurative soccer post before I try to look at something faster than this. I know there's like a lot of mixed opinions about throwing faster speed discs, so I'm interested to hear what you guys have to say about that.
Yeah. So the virus, when you're throwing the virus for your max distance shot, how much power would you say you're putting into that disc when you're throwing it? Like, is it like a full rip to get it to do that?
No. If I do a full rip, it's going like way over there. It's still like probably 80% to allow me to like still somewhat control where it's going and like not turn it over.
Okay. And are you able to like full rip on your crave or your river? Obviously not in wind for the river.
Yeah, probably. And it might get kind of close to where the virus is going, if that's kind of what you're thinking.
Yeah, I'm trying to think through, like, is there any disc that you have where you're like, I've got the wide open field, full send, like Goku, Kamehameha, bang, I'm sending this thing out there.
Yeah, it's the virus for me. Like, if it's a wide open field and you know, we don't have this course here, but if it was like wide open 1,000 feet away and I just needed to get it as far as I can, it's the virus for me that I'm going to just rip on.
Okay. Awesome. Well, Brad, I had Brad go out and try two distance drivers, and I think they're both very fantastic, have really cool names and really cool stamps. So, Brad, what'd you find?
Well, I was telling Robbie before I jumped on here that this is a particularly challenging field day for me. It reminds me of the field day I had for the Envy, Robbie, if you remember that. I think it was like the third episode maybe, somewhere in the first couple, where it was just pouring down the rain. I am still wet. My feet are still soaked. You know, it was just one of those days. So I went out there with pretty good spirits, and, you know, it was very humbling. Let's just say that, because I've been, like, doing much better. I've been throwing better. I've been able to throw different shots, different discs. And so looking at the flight numbers of these two, the Astronaut is 12.6, -4.1. The Mamba is 11.6, -5.1. So in my mind, I'm like, I'm going to just throw these both 500 feet. Just, I know what they're going to do. They're like the Astronaut especially, I think it's in the active premium, so it's like probably in the 160, upper 160 class probably. I didn't weigh it. And then the Mamba is just standard 173. But I was like, it doesn't matter. They're so understable. I'm going to flip them up, and I'm just going to blast these things into infinity. Turns out that was not the case at all. And they're very humbling because, you know, I think you're like, and Robbie pointed this out, I didn't even think of this, but they say distance driver. My initial body reaction was to throw them as hard as I possibly could. And they just don't work that way. I mean, they'll burn over. They don't do what they're supposed to do. It's just like the farther speed, and I'm not going to do my normal analysis per se on these discs. I'm going to give you a sense of what they did on each angle and everything, but I threw them completely wrong. And it's just how it is. I think the lesson learned from this is maybe more important. But, you know, they would burn over, but the higher speed, there's like more margin for error. It's just like when you creep down into like the 7 to 9 speed area, even if like you get the nose angle wrong or like the release angle wrong, it doesn't seem like the effects are so dramatic. But where I was hitting them so hard with a 12 speed, and I was like, man, I got to blast these things. A lot more margin of error. So just warning there. Both of them flew very similarly. I will say the Mamba had a little bit more stability than probably advertised. I'm not saying they were overstable, but the Mamba definitely could come out of the ante line or a turnover, flip up line, whatever it was at the end if I really wanted it to. However, it would pretty much keep the line that you put on it. So both of them hitting them flat. They both went really straight, and I could tell they both have relatively high glide. They're both 6 glide. They did want to just like pop up into the air, but I think where I threw them so hard, I was like sacrificing some touch and control that like I wanted to throw them really low to the ground, Robbie. I don't know what that was about, but they just but they would hover forever. If I got them up in the air again, they would glide significantly, and they would both turn right, like pretty easily, like pretty immediately when I threw them. So that means like their turn angles and their turn as advertised were pretty accurate. So they would definitely turn on flat for me. Hyzer angle, they both would flip up to flat. The Mamba would flip up to flat and turn right, and at the very end it would come back a little for me. That's why I said it has maybe like a sneaky stability. The Astronaut would just keep going right. It would flip up and keep going right, which is ironic because it's the -4, the Mamba's the -5, right? Again, plastic type conditions, guy throwing them really badly in the rain, you know, we'll just take it with a grain of salt. Don't come at me in the comments. I'm sure you all throw your Mambas and Astronaut very good, and I'm proud of you. So the Anheuser line, I did try to roller both of these, Robbie. I didn't tell you that. I was really trying to hit a roller angle, and I did at the end finally, and I think I was kind of realizing I didn't have to kill these things at the end, and I did start finding some like usefulness out of both of these. But I was able to hit both of them and get them to kind of do that like almost like a sky ante and hit on their edge and roll about, 60 to 80 feet probably for me, which is more than I've really been able to do. I kept trying to do that with a diamond, and I just failed miserably. But these definitely did that for me, which was great. On average distance on all these lines, I didn't really break that like 340 mark for me. I can throw my Thrasher farther than that, and I was like, well, that's why I was like, oh, I'll kill these things. I'll throw them 450 feet because I'll be able to flip them up and they'll glide for days. So on forehand, I did try them on forehand just for sake of science. I would personally not throw any of these on forehand. They are too understable for forehand. They're not that sweet spot where like the Thrasher is, where it still has some stability for me, where it will come back. I was all over the place. I could throw them far. I could throw them about 280 to 300 on forehand. It just the angle and landing spot was very unpredictable. So I would not personally throw them that way. So that seems like a hot jumbled mess of garbage probably. But here's what I kind of took away. I do think that, number one, I don't have a disc like this in my bag right now. I'm like you, I'm just kind of getting comfortable maybe with the understability stuff, and I don't know how much. I know you have a spin and an uplink. I was pretty comfortable putter and mid-range with the understable disc, but coming up into the fairway and distance driver category, I'm a little uncomfortable, and honestly I'm still uncomfortable with these. I do think the Mamba probably flies what I want my Hades to fly like, if I'm being honest, Robbie. So I don't think I have the arm speed to quite give it the super understability as advertised, but I think it definitely, if I practice with it and practice the touch and finesse out of my hand and not try to kill it, it probably would fly pretty understable. It would always flip up and turn right for me and maybe finish straight. I think that's the disc that would do that. I keep trying to drop down and wait with Hades all the time, find special Hades, but I think maybe the Mamba is what would fly like that for me. Astronaut, Robbie, is Astronaut typically a roller disc for people? I mean, that seems like a good utility disc for that, but for me, I'm not going to throw that shot.
Yeah,
So.
I think the Astronaut, it just depends on who's throwing it. So for some people, it's definitely a roller option for them. Others, it can be because of all that glide, I have seen people use it for a super max distance shot on just that Sky Anheuser and just pop it up there and just watch it just sail off into space, honestly, for a lack of a better word.
Yeah.
I think that's what UC had in mind, when they made the disc was.
Makes sense. It's called the Astronaut. Makes sense. Yeah, and maybe that's it too. I was just maybe not giving these things enough airtime, or height to really do what they needed to do also. Again, that's, I think I said last week, Connor pointed out something in my forum which was really good, and now I'm fixated on it, and I just feel like my releases are maybe a little all over the place. So take it for what it's worth. Looking at your bag, though, Travis, and I think what Robbie's trying to say, I think the moral of the story is these are great discs to learn more distance without having to kill something. And again, I think with some practice and some time, not 45 minutes in the pouring down rain in a random field somewhere, I think someone could learn to really love this and at least maybe get you introduced into the distance driver category. So maybe an easy to use sort of thing to get you above that 300 mark or something. So
yeah,
I'll let Robbie kind of dive in on his thought process, but I did want to encourage anybody who hasn't thrown something like this. If you're like, hey, I'm going to throw this really understable driver, and then you get out in the field and just shank it all day like I did, it's probably because you're throwing it too hard. Stick in there. Robbie's going to give you some tips.
Yeah. So Travis, because you have the virus in your bag and the uplink and the spin, I think it's a really good segue to a disc like this, because I've worked with a ton of beginners at this point in my disc golf journey, and some beginners I'll hand an understable disc and they'll be like, I just literally can't use this, and it's because they have this natural Anheuser release and they pull everything over, and it hurts my heart for them because that until they figure that out, yeah, I totally understand you can't get over on this. So it makes me really happy to hear that for your virus, you're yeah, I can't go full power on this or else it's just going to burn over. So my question mark for you would be, the first question, how big are your hands? Do you have decent sized hands or do you have smaller hands?
Medium.
Okay, that's fair.
Yeah.
That's fair.
Yeah.
Because part of why I want to get you a disc like this is I think that I am obviously someone, I think I have multiple videos on the internet that you can go back and say that I'm being a hypocrite going against of don't throw distance drivers, yada, yada, yada. But I do think that in the journey to becoming a better player, if we just focus on throwing putters and mid-ranges and we do all of that, putters and mid-ranges both respond well to being thrown nose up. Like, that's just a fact. And Brad definitely hinted at this. These get much more extreme. They tell you when you're throwing the nose angle wrong on a fairway driver or a distance driver. So as you're improving and you find yourself in your soccer field, I would love to start putting a distance driver in your hand so that your hand can get comfortable with the rim width difference of a distance driver versus a fairway driver versus a mid-range. And I'd be very curious to see how this flies if you throw it similar to your virus.
Me too. Yeah, that sounds awesome.
So, my follow-up would be, have you ever thrown either a virus or not a virus? You've obviously thrown a virus. You have one in your bag. Words are hard. Have you ever thrown a Mamba or an Astronaut before?
No, not at all. Nothing even numbered like that.
Okay. So, with that being said, we're breaking away from, I intentionally broke away from Latitude and our MVP because, once again, I think people fully believe we're like an MVP show. We're not. We just like those discs. So, which of those sounds more interesting to you? Or, like, are you Team Mamba? Because I agree with Brad. I think the Mamba can be really good. But also, if you're like, man, Astronaut looks real good too. What are you thinking?
Brad said something when he was describing the flight of the Mamba about it like a going and then kind of cutting back, which reminded me of the virus in the way that it works for me. And that made me think, yeah, that's pretty sweet. So with those two descriptions, the Mamba sounded pretty nice to me.
Awesome. Well, Then what we'll do, Travis, is we've got a G-Star Mamba on its way to you.
Beautiful.
So that you can test it out. Would you be willing to come back on the show later on and let us know how it flies?
I would love to do that.
Come on. Well, Travis, thank you so much for coming on, man. And was it painful being here on the show?
It wasn't painful. Robbie and Brad, you should know that all us fans appreciate you too. Everybody, say it in the comments. We love Brad and Robbie.
Well, that's very nice of you. We appreciate the honesty too with your, being honest about your putting distances and your throwing distance, because that's so helpful to everybody that's really starting out and really probably in the place that you are. And I mean, probably I would argue, Robbie, that players probably stay in that place for a long time. Like, I would feel like, I'm in 2 years in right now, and I feel like I'm maybe just starting to edge out of that, but not enough to throw an Astronaut correctly. So maybe I need to go back down into that category for a little bit.
Yeah, I think that people forget, like, we watch the pros throw. We watch all these people throw on YouTube. And if you're watching some of the major YouTubers, like you're watching Hunter and Trevor, you're watching me, we literally do this for a job. We make content for our job. So at the end of the day, you can easily convince yourself that it's worth it to go out there and putt for an hour because you don't want to look dumb on a video. Like, that can cross your mind. Now, do either me, Hunter, or Trevor do that? No, we don't. But the thought is there. So, like, you can try to improve in that aspect. But as someone who, like, is playing it casually or a weekend warrior in disc golf, it's okay to accept your numbers, accept your distances, and to say, like, I guarantee you, Travis, if you have the mindset from 40 that you're willing to come on in front of thousands of people and say, yeah, I'm not even attempting 40 footers, I'm laying those up. To me, I want you as a doubles partner rather than the guy who comes on the show and he's like, oh yeah, 40 footers? Yeah, I make like 4 or 5 of them pretty easy. Like, cool story, bro. Like, that's fine. You can say whatever you want on the internet. I don't care. But being real is what it takes to move past that part of the game. So, Travis, I just really respect you, man, and appreciate you coming on, and am looking forward to having you to hear honest feedback on how the Mamba goes.
Awesome.
Cool.
Yeah,
we will see you in a future episode, sir.
Thanks so much, guys.
Brad, I just feel like it was so refreshing. I don't know why, but it just... Travis, you have a very comforting demeanor.
Yeah.
So
I was getting sleepy, but in a good way. Like, I was like, just tell me a story, please.
Yeah.
Tell me a story. so I can hear it and, fall asleep and have dreams of disc golf. But I will say too, selfishly, that I talked about that first episode with an envy, right? Where it was like rainy and awful. And, I was very like just disgruntled after that. And I just was like, why am I even doing this? But I will say, even after today's, like, maybe like I'm growing, if I'm not growing in my game so much right now, maybe like mentally in the game, because I was like, it's raining, it's okay. Like maybe these discs aren't for me. Maybe I need to throw them again sometime. But it wasn't like demoralizing or anything. It's just like, okay, well, it was a rough rainy day. On to the next one, episode 19.
And I say, if y'all don't show Brad some love in the comments, we're in trouble, because the man is literally getting out there in the rain for the content to help you guys and help come up with some great options for you. So we appreciate you, Brad. I'll speak for the collective In the Bag family and say thank you for getting out there and working through some frustrating field sessions for us.
My pleasure. And I do it for you all. Hopefully it's valuable. And, it was still fun. At the end of the day, I was still playing disc golf for my job. So very blessed there for sure.
Come on. But speaking of other fun aspects of your job, what's new in the warehouse?
So we're continuing. We have so much MVP we're putting up. That'll all be up by Friday. The rest of the disc craft, that we just got a huge shipment, so it's still going up. Some stuff we haven't had in a while, like vultures, are in there. There's some Z Flex buzzes that are in there. We have Tour Series Scorches and Nukes and Lunas and everything. So be sure to check out, just browse through all the Discraft inventory. You'll see some just random good stuff everywhere. Mint Disc Free Tails, their new stamp on that's going up. There's a trilogy drop that's coming out this week. Has some, I think, Lucid Ice Glimmer harps, I believe. And some the first run Glory came out, so make sure you check that out.
Rebecca?
Prodigy has some... I'll tell you what, Prodigy is killing the stamp game, if you all have not realized. But they have this Glow T-Rex. I'm blanking now. It's either MX3 or a PA3. Don't remember. Anyway, it's awesome. It's a Triceratops Glow plastic. Beautiful. There's also one that's like a double-headed raven, but also if you look at it differently, it's a tiger, I think, or wolf. So, yeah, just check it out. There's some new Prodigy stuff. Yeah, they're killing their stamp game. Whoever is the designer for the stamps, if by some miracle you listen to this show, submit a form. Let us know. We'd love to have you on. So,
yeah, for real.
Yeah, ton of that stuff is going up, so check all of that out. Non-foundation related, we'll switch over to Atlas really quick. Sneak preview dropping today when this podcast drops. We have the Atlas rangefinder, the Scout. It's not a drop. It's coming back out. It's a restock. But check those out. They will go fast, but they do drop today at 5 p.m. right at the same time as this podcast. So feel free to pause the podcast, go over to atlasdgs.com, grab a rangefinder, a Scout, and then come back over here and finish the episode. So
Easy peasy.
That's what we got going on this week, Robbie.
Dude, super exciting. Well, Brad, I appreciate you, man. Appreciate getting to do this. 18 episodes in, and we got 2 cool ones coming up that we have planned. So already excited for the future with everything we got going. But remember, as always, y'all, if it's good,
keep in the bag. See you for episode 19.